Imagine for a moment the kind of impact on a family when chaos hits. And not from outside, but from within, legal fights over a loved one's estate.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking really gut-wrenching arguments, countless hours just lost.
Yeah.
And millions of dollars sometimes spent.
Yeah.
All because of something that maybe could have been simple. A lack of proper estate planning. It just adds so much stress and confusion to Greece, doesn't it?
It really does. Amplifies everything.
That's why today we're doing a deep dive into this often, daunting world of wills, death, and taxes.
Yeah.
Our mission really is to give you the knowledge to, secure your assets, cut down those potential legal and tax bills significantly.
And crucially, maintain family harmony.
Exactly. Keep the peace after you're gone.
And look, our insights today, they're drawn from a really exceptional resource. It's Noel Whittaker's book, Wills, Death, and Taxes Made Simple.
He's a big name, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Noel Whittaker isn't just an author. He's a member of the Order of Australia for his work in personal finance, an adjunct professor. His first book, Making Money Made Simple, sold over 1 million copies.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was even named one of the 100 most influential books of the 20th century. So, yeah, it's safe to say he knows how to simplify complex stuff.
Okay, so our mission then is to untangle this massive, complex subject for you listening. It's a field affected by, different state laws?
Intricate tax implications, superannuation rules, and even, as we'll get into, quite a bit of human psychology.
Right. We'll try to cut through all that overwhelm, give you the essential information so you can feel more confident, navigating the path to a good outcome for you and your loved ones.
Let's do it.
So let's unpack the cornerstone, the absolute foundation of all estate planning. What is it, and why is it just so critical to get right?
Well, at its very heart, it's your will. This document, it's like your ultimate narrative control after you're gone.
Narrative control, I like that.
Yeah, it dictates not just who gets what, but how it's received. It makes sure your legacy is one of, clarity and harmony, not confusion and conflict.
Wow.
A well-written will, one that's current. It ensures your estate is settled quickly, saves huge amounts of time, effort, and money on those awful legal battles we mentioned earlier.
That definitely sounds foundational. But what kind of assets does a will actually cover? I mean, does it cover everything I own?
Ah, that's a really crucial distinction. A will can only deal with property that is specifically solely in your name.
Okay.
So assets held jointly, like, say, a family home owned with your spouse as joint tenants, or things inside a trust, or owned by a company.
Right.
And even your superannuation, they are often not automatically dealt with by your will.
So they need separate planning.
Exactly. Separate consideration. And just quickly, some terms we'll use. Specific gifts are just what they sound like. Could be a favorite tea set, could be a multi-million-dollar mansion you want someone specific to have.
Got it.
The residue is basically what's left over, the balance after all those specific gifts are handed out and debts are paid.
Okay.
And a beneficiary is simply anyone named in your will, or maybe a trust, who's set to receive some kind of benefit.
So if a will is so vital, what happens if someone, if they don't have a valid one? Do the horror stories come true? Does the government just swoop in and take everything?
That's a really common misconception, actually. No, your estate gets distributed according to what are called intestacy laws.
Intestacy laws?
Yeah, and they vary by state here in Australia. The rules are generally based on close family connections, like spouse, kids, parents. It doesn't automatically go to the government.
Okay, that's reassuring.
But it can still get incredibly complex without a clear will. We heard from one reader, actually. She was denied a Centrelink pension.
Oh, wow.
Because her husband's intestate estate, he died without a will, was handled by the public trustee. And it turned out she was listed as a beneficiary in some unknown trust she didn't even know existed.
No way.
Yeah. It just shows how tangled things can get for those left behind when there's no clear will. So much confusion.
Okay, given that scenario, what's the advice on actually preparing a will? Can you just, download a template online, or do you really need to see a professional?
Look, professional guidance is, I'd say, paramount. It's really crucial to get your will prepared by a solicitor who specializes in estate planning.
A specialist, okay.
Yeah, it's a highly specialized and complex area,
Yeah.
especially with those varying state laws and all the tax implications. And also, it's not just a one-time task.
Right, you need to keep it updated.
Definitely. You should really review your will every 5 years or so, or, after any big life event, marriage, divorce, maybe the death of someone you've named as a beneficiary or executor.
Makes sense. Life changes, so the will needs to change too.
Precisely.
So, If simple wills are the foundation, you mentioned testamentary trusts earlier.
Yeah.
They sound like adding strategic wings to your plan. Yeah. What are these other more powerful options?
Yeah, the book outlines sort of three main ways people approach getting a will done: free, cheap, or professional.
Okay.
And that can lead to different types of wills, like a simple one, a testamentary trust, or what's called a mutual will. There's also something called a statutory will, but that involves the Supreme Court, more unusual cases.
Right.
But today, yeah, let's focus on the testamentary trust because it really is a powerful tool. It's got some significant advantages, especially if you're thinking about asset protection or tax minimization.
Okay, tell us more. How does a testamentary trust actually work? What makes it so much more powerful than just a straightforward will?
Well, basically, a testamentary trust holds assets in trust after you pass away. And then it distributes them over time according to instructions you leave, rather than just handing everything over in one lump sum.
Okay, so it's managed over time.
Exactly. And what's really strategic is its dual power. First, asset protection. This can be invaluable if, say, a beneficiary isn't great with money, or maybe they're bankrupt, or they work in a job where they could get sued, like a doctor.
Ah, so it shields the inheritance.
Precisely. It shields their inheritance from creditors, or maybe from the fallout if a relationship breaks down.
And the tax side.
That's the other key advantage. Tax minimization. Income earned by the trust can be distributed to beneficiaries, and then it's taxed at their individual tax rates. So you can do income splitting.
Right.
And this is particularly good for minors, for kids under 18. Income they get from a testamentary trust is treated as accepted income.
Accepted income.
Yeah, which means it's taxed at normal adult rates, which is way better than unearned income, like from regular investments, which gets taxed really punitively for minors.
Wow, that sounds like a huge difference. Can you give us an example? How does that tax benefit work for, say, grandchildren?
Absolutely. Think about Jules and Jim in the book. They wanted to leave $50,000 to each grandchild. Now, if their children just gifted that money later from their own assets, any investment earnings the grandkids under 18 made would be heavily taxed as unearned income. Might cost around $900 in tax on just $2,000 of earnings. But if that same $50,000 was left directly to each grandchild in the will, or specifically through a testamentary trust, it's treated as accepted income because it's from an inheritance. So those grandkids would pay zero tax on that $2,000.
Zero tax? That's massive.
It's a significant difference, yeah. Preserves much more of the inheritance. But it's important to remember these trusts aren't free.
Ah, the downsides.
Right. They involve setup costs and ongoing admin costs. So they might not be the best fit for smaller estates or, less complicated situations.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, beyond the strictly legal documents, I understand there's something called a letter of wishes. What's that about? Why would someone use that alongside their will?
Yeah, so your will, it's a very strict legal document, right? It shouldn't really have personal messages or suggestions in it that might confuse things legally.
Okay.
A letter of wishes is prepared alongside your will, and it's a wonderful way to explain why you're making certain gifts or express your hopes for the beneficiaries without complicating the actual legal will.
So it adds context.
Exactly. Adds context, explains your thinking. Plus, you can update it easily without needing to formally change your will every time. Offers a lot of flexibility.
So it's about providing that guidance without messing with the legal stuff. Why is having a letter like that so crucial, especially, say, if there's maybe some potential for family disagreements?
It's crucial because it can really help a court figure things out quickly if there are challenges to your will later on. It gives insight into your actual intentions.
Right.
A solicitor friend mentioned in the book even suggests using a statutory declaration that's a more formal witness statement as an alternative, especially if you know the beneficiaries don't really get along well.
Extra layer of formality.
Yeah. The danger of just saying, the kids know who gets what.
Wow.
It's huge. It has enormous potential to cause conflict and real heartache down the track. This letter provides clarity when you're not there to give it yourself.
Okay, that brings us to a really crucial person in all this. Often overlooked, once the will's signed, the person who actually does everything, the executor. So what exactly does that job involve? And what are some of the maybe harsh realities of being an executor?
The executor is the person or people responsible for making sure your wishes are actually carried out. And the duties are, they're extensive.
Like what?
obtaining death certificates, finding the will, notifying authorities, think ATO, Centralink paying bills, managing assets, and then ultimately distributing them according to the will.
Sounds like a lot.
It is. We heard from a reader who just finished winding up her mom's estate. The challenges were immense.
Yeah.
Dealing with banks, specifically NABI's bereavement team call center.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, involved lost documents, multiple calls, calls not returned, even 45-minute hold times. She actually ended up having to email the CEO to get things sorted.
Wow, that's persistence.
It really highlights the need for persistence, yeah, and tenacity in this role.
Okay, that sounds like a monumental task, frankly. What makes a good executor then? What sort of qualities should you look for when you're choosing this person?
That's an excellent question. First and foremost, trustworthiness, absolute honesty. You need someone who will act in the beneficiary's best interests, not their own.
Crucial.
Then, organizational skills. They've got to be able to track documents, deadlines, finances efficiently.
Right.
Financial literacy is also pretty key. So they can handle complex finances or, importantly, know when they need to bring in professionals, like an accountant.
Okay.
Availability is another big one. They need to be willing and able to actually take on the responsibility fairly promptly.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, having a good relationship with the beneficiaries really helps avoid disputes. Communication is key.
Makes sense.
And we've heard readers' stories that really hammer these points home. One mentioned that executors often end up paying the deceased bills out of their own pocket for months because bank accounts get frozen.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, setting up joint accounts with the executor before death can sometimes help with immediate cash flow needs. Another reader described their brother's nightmare dealing with MyGov and the ATO.
What happened there?
After being notified of his death, all access to his online accounts was just shut down. Funds were remitted straight to the ATO. It took months to sort out. An ineffective executor can make a terrible time even harder for the family.
It really sounds like being an executor is almost a full-time job for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I bet a lot of listeners are thinking, note to self, choose very, very wisely.
Yes, good note.
What if you appoint more than one executor? Like maybe two siblings? Does that share the load, or does it just add more cooks in the kitchen?
Well, yes, having another person involved can maybe prevent temptation or errors, but it definitely introduces significant complications if they don't get along.
Ah, the relationship factor again.
Exactly. Or even just if they live far apart. We heard a reader's tale about that nightmare scenario. Co-executors who didn't trust each other, lived interstate. Communication was terrible.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it led to fears about how anything would get done, potential for major delays, and just a lot of added stress. So while it might sound good, you really need to think carefully about the dynamics.
Okay, so for the person being asked to be an executor,
Yeah.
what should they think about before they say yes? It sounds like a huge responsibility.
It is a really big decision. Accepting the role carries significant responsibilities. You can even face legal action if things go badly wrong.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. So it's crucial to understand what you're getting into. Understand the estate's components, its size, complexity, the types of assets before you accept.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that extreme situation mentioned in the book, Aunt Sue. She became executor for a relative with no local family. She ended up dealing with a super complex estate, overseas assets, property syndicates, a commercial property, plus all the mundane stuff like cleaning out cupboards.
Wow.
It just shows how overwhelming the role can be if you're not prepared or don't have the capacity for it.
Right. Now, let's shift focus to the beneficiaries, the people who actually receive things from the will. Choosing them seems simple, but you're saying it can be more complex than just dividing money equally, especially with tax.
Absolutely. Tax considerations are huge. Capital gains tax, CGT is a big one.
How does that work with inheritance?
Well, the family home, your main residence, that's normally CGT exempt. That's a big plus.
Okay.
Also, assets bought before a specific date, September 20th, 1985, here in Australia, those are generally pre-CGT assets and aren't subject to it.
Right.
And importantly, death itself doesn't trigger CGT, but the liability, the potential tax bill, passes on to the beneficiaries. They inherit the cost base.
Okay, that makes sense. But what are the pitfalls? Are there stories that show why understanding this stuff is so important?
Definitely. We heard about a woman who moved overseas. Because she was no longer an Australian resident, she lost her main residence exemption on her Australian home.
Oh, right.
When she sold it years later, she faced a massive CGT bill. potentially 90% of the sale proceeds.
90%.
Well, because she hadn't kept detailed records of all the improvements she'd made over the years, those records could have increased her cost base and reduced the taxable gain.
Record keeping again.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder of how crucial good records are, even for things you bought decades ago.
Okay. What happens if a will isn't clear? Or if someone feels, they haven't been treated fairly, haven't been properly provided for? What can they do? Can they dispute the will?
Yes, but there are two different terms here, and it's important to distinguish them. Challenging a will versus contesting a will.
Okay, what's the difference?
Challenging means you're alleging the will itself is invalid. Maybe because the person lacked mental capacity when they signed it, or there was undue influence, fraud, duress. Something fundamentally wrong with its creation.
Right.
If a challenge is successful, the whole will can be thrown out, and pretty much anyone can bring a challenge if they have grounds.
And contesting?
Contesting is different. That's when you claim the will is unfair, that an eligible person, usually a dependent or close family member, hasn't received proper provision from the estate.
So you're not saying the will is invalid, just unfair?
Exactly. If a contest is successful, it can alter how the estate is distributed, but the will itself might still stand in part.
Okay. And who pays for all this? Does it always come out of the estate?
That's a common misconception. It's not always borne by the estate. Unsuccessful claimants, whether challenging or contesting, might find themselves having to pay their own legal costs, which can be substantial.
Right, so it's a risky path.
It can be, yes. Needs careful legal advice.
Okay, moving on to another really crucial concept. Capacity. We hear this term a lot in estate planning. What does it actually mean to be of sound mind when you're making these big decisions?
Essentially, capacity is the ability to understand the nature and the effect of a decision you're making.
Okay.
And to make it freely, voluntarily, and then be able to communicate that decision clearly.
Right, sound mind.
Yeah. But what's vital here is that capacity isn't like an on-off switch. It often declines gradually. And it can even be temporarily affected by things like illness, medication, stress, trauma, even just grief or fatigue.
So it can fluctuate.
Exactly, which is precisely why putting an enduring power of attorney, EPA, in place long before it might actually be needed is so, so important.
Because if you wait until capacity is already lost...
It's too late. You can't make one then.
Right. So what exactly is an EPA? What power does it give your attorney?
An EPA grants someone you choose the authority to make decisions on your behalf if you lose capacity. And these can be really broad decisions: legal, financial, medical, personal, even lifestyle choices.
Wow, that's a lot of power.
It is. And it's not a casual document. It has to be signed by both you, the principal, and the attorney or attorneys you appoint. And it needs to be properly witnessed to be legally valid.
Okay, that sounds incredibly powerful and useful. But are there common situations where an EPA, even though it's meant to help, might actually cause problems or have unexpected downsides?
Unfortunately, yes. Because it grants such broad powers, an EPA can effectively be a license to steal if you appoint someone dishonest. They can act completely in your shoes financially.
That's terrifying.
It is. While you can try to limit the powers in the EPA document, that carries its own risks too. Maybe they can't do something genuinely needed later.
Tricky balance.
Very. And consider that shocking case study of Eva, the 85-year-old widow.
Oh, yes. What happened there?
Her neighbor, Tony, who she'd appointed as her attorney, moved her into a locked dementia ward when she was just temporarily incapacitated by an infection.
No.
Yes. And once she was in there, Tony started withdrawing cash from her accounts and even put her house up for sale.
Unbelievable. Could she stop him?
She had to fight for 6 months, going through guardianship tribunal hearings, just to prove she did have capacity and regain control of her own life and finances. She couldn't even get back the money Tony had already taken.
That's just awful. Really highlights the trust issue.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Choose someone you trust implicitly. And another key point.
Yeah.
You can't just amend an EPA if you change your mind or circumstances change.
You can't. What do?
You have to formally revoke the old one and then create an entirely new one.
Okay, good to know. Let's connect this now to the bigger picture of personal relationships. How do major life events like getting married, separating, getting divorced affect your will and your EPA? Sounds like there could be some surprising legal tripwires here.
Oh, there absolutely can be. Marriage, for instance. Generally, getting married automatically revokes any prior will you had.
Completely revokes it.
Usually, yes. Unless the will specifically contains what's called a contrary intention clause, saying it was made in contemplation of that marriage.
Okay.
Marriage also revokes an EPA appointment for anyone other than your new spouse.
Right. What about separation?
Separation is surprisingly different. Just separating without a formal divorce does not automatically revoke your will or your EPA.
Really? So your estranged partner could still inherit?
Yes. They could still inherit or even still act as your executor or attorney under an EPA, which might be the last thing you want.
Wow. And divorce?
Divorce in most states does revoke the parts of your will relating to your ex-spouse, gifts, appointments as executor, etc.
Okay, that makes sense.
But bizarrely, divorce does not typically revoke an EPA you might have given to your ex-spouse. There are exceptions. Queensland and the ACT have changed this, but in most places, that EPA could still be valid.
That seems like a huge oversight in the law.
Yeah.
So what's the absolute crucial takeaway for listeners going through separation or divorce?
The crucial takeaway is this. It is imperative, really imperative, to prepare a new will and also carefully review and likely revoke and remake your EPA after a divorce.
Get it all updated.
Absolutely. It ensures your intentions are crystal clear and align with the new financial reality after the divorce settlement. Get good legal advice here to avoid unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And just on a related practical note, we heard from a reader about the struggle retirees, especially widows, face getting credit cards after a partner dies or their income drops.
Yes, that's a common issue.
A much better strategy is for each partner to get a separate credit card in their own name before the main income earner retires. It can prevent a lot of heartache and hassle later on.
Good practical tip.
Yeah.
Okay, now, let's talk about something many people maybe don't realize has tax implications. The death tax.
Yeah.
You said Australia doesn't have official death duties.
Correct. Not in the traditional sense.
But there's a de facto death tax, especially with superannuation. What's that about?
That's right. A de facto death tax, usually 15% or 17%, including the Medicare levy, can apply to superannuation death benefits if they are paid to people considered non-dependents for tax purposes.
Non-dependents? Like who?
Typically adult children who are financially independent, parents, siblings, basically anyone other than a spouse or minor child or someone financially dependent on you at the time of death.
Okay, so how do you manage this? You mentioned nominations.
Yes. Understanding the different types of super death benefit nominations is key. There's non-minding, which just guides the Superfund trustee, but they don't have to follow.
It's just a suggestion.
Pretty much. Then there's a lapsing binding nomination. This does legally bind the trustee to pay who you nominate.
That sounds better.
But crucially, it lapses, usually every 3 years. If you don't renew it, it expires and might revert to being non-binding or at the trustee's discretion.
Okay, so you have to stay on top of it.
You do. And finally, there's a non-lapsing binding nomination. This also legally binds the trustee, but it does not expire. It stays in place until you change or revoke it.
That sounds like the most secure option.
It often is, but needs careful consideration and correct wording.
Can you give us an example? Just how big can this super tax hit be if it goes to a non-dependent?
It can be really significant. Take Robin's case from the book. He had a $300,000 super death benefit, which included life insurance held within the Superfund.
Oh.
It was paid to his parents, who were non-dependents. Now, because he'd only contributed for 6 out of a potential 45 working years, a large part of that payout, $260,000, was considered the untaxed element, or related to insurance proceeds where premiums weren't taxed.
Right.
That portion was taxed at 30%. Leading to a total tax bill on the $300,000 of up to $84,000.
$84,000, just gone in tax.
Exactly. Or consider Greg, who left super from different funds to his 2 kids, Laura and Damien, both getting the same dollar amount in the will. But because the insurance premiums in the fund paying Damien had been claimed as a tax deduction by the fund, Damien's payout had a much larger taxable component than Laura's. He ended up with significantly less in hand, even though the will intended them to get equal amounts.
Well, so the source of the super money matters for tax.
Hugely. It is absolutely critical that anyone drafting a will understands all assets are not traded equally for tax purposes, especially insurance inside super. It needs specific advice.
Okay, that's a really important warning. What about self-managed super funds, SMSFs? They seem like another layer of complexity again. What special things do people need to think about there?
SMSFs definitely need special attention, you're right. Often the members of the fund are also the trustees.
Right, usually a couple maybe.
Exactly. So what happens if one member becomes incapacitated? Who acts as trustee then?
Good question.
A common solution is to have a company act as the trustee, rather than individuals. Directors of the company can then be appointed or replaced if one becomes incapacitated.
Okay, the corporate trustee structure.
Or you could have an enduring power of attorney in place, specifically allowing someone to step in as trustee if needed. Another thing is liquidity.
Liquidity, meaning cash.
Yeah. Can the SMSF actually pay a death benefit if required? If all the assets are tied up in, say, property, how will the payout happen? And remember, SMSF trustees are personally liable for the fund's liabilities, so there's risk involved.
Okay, lots to consider with SMSFs. Now, moving away from super, how you own property can also have big implications for your will, can't it? Can you break down those terms like life interest versus right to reside, and joint tenants versus tenants in common?
Absolutely. These distinctions matter a lot. A life interest is where you give someone the right to live in a property for their lifetime, and they might also be able to earn income from it, like renting out a room.
Okay.
A right to reside usually just gives them the right to live there, often with conditions, but not necessarily to profit from it.
And when their interest ends?
When they pass away or move out. Then the property typically goes to whoever you've named as the remainder man in your will. They then inherit the property fully.
Got it. And joint tenants versus tenants in common.
This is about co-ownership. Joint tenants is very common for married couples buying a home. It has the right of survivorship, meaning when one joint tenant dies, their share automatically passes to the surviving joint tenants, completely outside the will. The will has no say over that share.
Ah, okay, so it bypasses the will.
Exactly. Tenants in common, on the other hand, means each owner has a distinct, separate share. It could be 50-50 or 70-30, whatever, and they can leave their specific share to someone in their will. It does not automatically go to the other co-owner.
Right, so tenants in common allows your will to control your share.
Correct. And one more property point. Be careful about holding your main residence, your home, inside a company or a trust structure.
Why is that?
Because doing that can mean you lose the main residence exemption from capital gains tax, which is usually a massive tax benefit when you eventually sell.
Okay, another tax trap to watch out for. Let's shift gears slightly to central link issues for couples. You mentioned many retirees get income support. How can a will accidentally mess things up for a surviving partner's pension?
Well, the most common mistake we see, and it's highlighted in the book, is couples simply leaving all their assets to each other in their wills.
That sounds normal. Isn't that what most couples do?
It sounds normal, but it can have devastating consequences for Centrelink. Consider Bob and Betty's case study.
Okay.
They owned their home, had $800,000 in other assessable assets, and were getting a part pension. Bob dies and naturally leaves everything to Betty in his will.
Right.
Suddenly, Betty's assessable assets jump to $800,000. This now exceeds the Centrelink assets test limit for a single homeowner, which is quite precise, currently around $667,500.
So what happens?
In one fell swoop, she loses her pension entirely. And not just the pension payment, but all the valuable concessions that come with it, like cheaper prescriptions, council rates discounts.
Oh, wow. Can't she just refuse the inheritance from Bob?
It's not that simple. If you refuse or gift away an inheritance like that, Centrelink generally treats it as a deprived asset for 5 years.
Meaning they still count it against you?
Yes, they still count it in your assets test for 5 years.
That's right.
So it wouldn't help her get the pension back immediately. This is why smart estate planning needs to look at optimizing both tax outcomes and Centrelink outcomes. It's a balancing act.
Definitely sounds like it needs expert advice. Okay, aged care funding. A huge concern for so many families. Yeah. Can you quickly clarify the main payment options, RAD versus DAP, and any crucial tips?
Sure. So when someone moves into residential aged care, they often need to pay an accommodation cost. The main ways are the RAD, which is a refundable accommodation deposit. It's a lump sum you pay up front.
And it's refundable.
Yes. The balance is refunded to the person's estate when they pass away. The alternative is the DAP, the daily accommodation payment. That's like paying rent, a daily fee instead of the lump sum. You can also choose a combination of both.
Okay. Any critical tips around this?
Yes, a really crucial one. If anyone, say a family member, has loaned money to the resident to help pay for their RAD, that loan must be clearly documented, properly legally documented.
Why?
Because otherwise, when the RAD is refunded to the estate after death, there could be huge disputes among the beneficiaries about whether that money should be repaid to the lender first or just distributed as part of the estate according to the will. Clear documentation avoids that fight.
Good point.
And we heard from a solicitor friend who intervened in a tricky situation. An attorney under an EPA was about to sell the person's house to pay the RAD.
Okay.
But the solicitor realized the will specifically left the house to the person's daughter. If the house was sold, it would come back to the estate as cash, effectively disinheriting the daughter from the house itself.
Oh, no. So what do they do?
They wisely advised paying the DAP instead, the daily fee, even though it might cost more over time. This kept the house intact so it could pass to the daughter as intended by the will. It preserved the will's specific intention.
Wow, that's a great example of thinking ahead and understanding the flow-on effects. Are there any other, maybe less common, estate planning tools that can bypass the whole will and probate process? Maybe offering flexibility or tax benefits?
Yes, absolutely. Investment bonds can be a fantastic alternative estate planning tool in certain situations.
Investment bonds, how do they work for estate planning?
Well, they have some unique features. Tax is paid within the bond, usually at 30% on the investment earnings. So when the beneficiary eventually receives the money after, say, 10 years, there's no personal capital gains tax event for them.
Okay, tax is handled internally.
Correct. And crucially, investment bonds are generally considered non-estate assets, meaning they bypass your will entirely. They don't need to go through probate. They can be paid directly to your nominated beneficiary relatively quickly after your death, avoiding potential disputes or delays associated with the will.
That sounds really useful, like an alternative to a trust.
Exactly. They can be a great alternative to a testamentary trust sometimes. There are no setup costs like with a trust, no need to appoint a trustee, no ongoing tax reporting requirements for the trust itself. Much simpler for many families.
Can you give us an example? How might someone use an investment bond to achieve specific wishes without a complex trust?
Sure. Think about Margot, the 86-year-old grandmother in the book, and her grandson Jack, who's 24 and, well, not great with money.
Okay.
Margot set up a $100,000 investment bond for Jack. She arranged for the ownership of the bond to automatically transfer to him when he turns 40.
So he can't access it all at once when he's young.
Right. But she also set it up so he receives regular annual payments from the bond to help him along the way. And she authorized some trusted friends who could approve special, larger withdrawals if Jack genuinely needed it, say, for a first home deposit.
Wow, that's quite tailored.
Exactly. It achieved all her goals, protecting the capital, providing staged access, allowing for emergencies, all without the cost and complexity of setting up and running a formal testamentary trust. Plus, Margot could potentially change those arrangements before her passing if Jack's circumstances changed dramatically. It offers incredible flexibility.
That does sound like a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's also touch on equity release. Things like reverse mortgages. This is about accessing your home's value while you're still alive, isn't it?
That's right. Tapping into the equity built up in your home.
What do people typically use it for? And what are the big things to consider?
Common uses are things like supplementing retirement income, creating an emergency fund buffer, maybe refinancing existing debt, or even funding home renovations so they can enjoy their home for longer.
Sounds useful for cash flow and retirement.
It can be. But there are crucial considerations. The big one is equity release will significantly reduce the amount of equity left in your home, which means less inheritance for your beneficiaries.
Right, that's the trade-off.
Exactly, and this is why communication with your family, your potential beneficiaries, is really essential if you're considering this. People have vastly different views. Some kids will say, Mom, Dad, enjoy it, you earned it. Others might feel like the house equity is sort of their right, their expected inheritance.
Potential for conflict there, too.
Definitely. And making this decision also has major implications for your existing will and your EPA. You'd need to review them to make sure beneficiaries are still treated fairly and as you intend, given the reduced value of the estate's main asset.
Good point. What about multi-generational living? Things like granny flats seem more common now. Are there pitfalls there too, especially around Centrelink and tax?
Yes, these arrangements are great for families, but can be tricky legally and financially. For example, if parents simply transfer full ownership of their home to an adult child in return for the right to live in a granny flat, Centrelink might treat that transfer as deprivation. They might see it as gifting away an asset to get the pension, which can impact eligibility.
The deprivation rules again.
Right. And there can also be capital gains tax implications. If the granny flat interest, the right to live there, isn't created properly in a legally recognized way, it could potentially trigger a CGT event for the parents when they move in.
So it needs careful structuring.
Very careful. Julia Hartman, a tax expert mentioned in the book, often suggests a simpler solution might be for the parents and children to each take a formal ownership interest in the property they plan to share, like tenants in common.
Okay.
We saw that case study of Mary, the widow, on the full pension. She gifted her house to her single daughter, Tess, but retained a formal life interest for herself.
How did that help?
It achieved several things. It protected Tess from potential future family conflict over inheriting the house. It ensured Tess had a secure place to live. And because Mary retained the life interest, it didn't negatively impact her central retention eligibility under their rules.
Clever structuring.
Okay.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the really inevitable part, funeral arrangements. It seems most people avoid thinking about it.
Understandably so.
But that often leaves grieving families stressed at the worst possible time. What's the key takeaway here?
Just having a clear understanding of the deceased's wishes is invaluable. Simple things. Did they want burial or cremation? Did they have a preference for the type of service or venue?
Right.
We heard that poignant reader's tale about having to ask their dying father on his deathbed about burial or cremation. That's a burden no one should carry in those final moments. Knowing beforehand makes such a difference.
Mm-hmm. And paying for it. Can the executor get reimbursed?
Yes, usually banks will reimburse the executor for reasonable funeral costs fairly quickly once they're presented with the death certificate and the funeral director's invoice. The funeral is generally considered a priority debt of the estate.
Okay. What are the different ways to prepay or plan for funeral costs?
Mm-hmm.
And are there any options people should maybe avoid?
Sure, there are a few main ways. A pre-planned funeral usually involves discussing your wishes with a funeral director, maybe paying about 50% up front, with the balance due later when the service happens. A prepaid funeral is where you meet with a director, make all the arrangements, and pay the full cost up front. This locks in the price, which can be good, but it usually ties your family to using that specific funeral company.
Right, less flexibility later.
Exactly. Then there's a funeral bond. This is basically an investment product specifically designed to save for funeral costs. The earnings are often tax-free up to a certain limit, and it can be held jointly, say, with your spouse or executor.
Okay, anything to avoid.
Yes. A crucial warning from the book, and echoed by ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission: avoid funeral insurance.
Why is that?
ASIC warns you can easily end up paying far more in premiums over the years than the actual benefit amount your family will receive. Plus, if you miss payments or decide to cancel the policy, you often lose all the money you've paid in. It's generally poor value.
So what's better?
A simple dedicated savings account or perhaps a prepaid funeral plan might be a much better and cheaper option for covering those costs.
Good advice. And there was another reader tip about who handles the arrangements.
Yes, a really helpful one. Consider asking someone who is slightly less close emotionally, perhaps a sister-in-law, a close family friend, to take the lead on the practical funeral arrangements.
Right.
It allows the immediate family, spouse, children the space they need to actually grieve without getting totally consumed by what can feel like death administration in those first few days.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, as our lives are just so digital these days, so is our legacy, right? What does all this estate planning mean for your digital life? Things like photos, social media, crypto. It holds real value, doesn't it?
It holds surprising value, both sentimental and sometimes financial. And neglecting these digital assets can leave a real tangled mess for your loved ones.
Okay, so how do you manage your digital legacy? What steps should people take?
First step, take inventory. Make a list of all your important digital assets. Think social media accounts, email, cloud photo storage, online banking, any cryptocurrency holdings, even subscriptions.
Get it all down on paper or digitally?
Exactly. Second, decide their fate. Most digital assets can't just be passed on like a house. You need to decide what you want to happen to each account. Should Facebook be memorialized? Should emails be deleted?
Right.
Third, appoint a digital executor. Don't just assume your main legal executor will know how to handle this stuff or even have the passwords. Choose someone tech-savvy and trustworthy. Give them clear instructions and secure access.
Secure access, passwords. That's the tricky bit, isn't it? How do you manage that?
It is tricky. A paper list of passwords needs constant updating and secure storage. Probably a better option these days is using a reputable digital password manager.
Like LastPass or 1Password.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Many of them now have legacy features. These allow you to designate someone who can securely request access to your passwords or receive specific passwords after you pass away. It bypasses the need for insecure lists.
Okay, that sounds much more manageable. So the overall message for preparation, as Noel Whittaker emphasizes, It's complex, but don't get overwhelmed.
Precisely. Don't let the complexity paralyze you. Take small, manageable steps. And one thing that truly eases the burden later is
What's that?
good record keeping. It's just paramount. For tax purposes, for managing the estate, and simply for making your executor's job so much easier.
So keep those folders.
Yes. Keep separate, organized folders, physical or digital, for superannuation statements, property documents, share certificates, everything relevant. It saves so much hassle. We heard that reader's tale about their parents going into aged care. They spoke of the immense relief they felt because their parents had professional advisors, a financial advisor, accountant, solicitor, and a financial plan already in place.
So the kids could focus on care.
Exactly. It allowed the children to focus on supporting their parents emotionally and physically rather than getting completely bogged down in stressful paperwork and financial chaos during an already difficult time.
That's powerful. Okay, so today we've really taken a deep dive into this intricate world of wills, death, and taxes.
We certainly have.
We've unpacked the cornerstone role of getting that will right, explored the power and, the costs of testamentary trusts, highlighted how critical choosing the right executor is. We've looked at how big life events like marriage and divorce shake things up, shed light on those surprising superannuation death benefit taxes.
Yeah, the de facto death tax.
Clarified options for aged care, how property ownership works, even equity release. And didn't forget the digital legacy or just the practicalities of funeral planning.
It's been a comprehensive look, and hopefully you listening are now armed with some really crucial insights to navigate this topic, one that's often avoided.
Yeah.
This knowledge really can save your loved ones huge amounts of stress, time, and money. It can change a potentially chaotic time into one of clarity and hopefully peace.
And as Noel Whittaker points out, it's not just about the assets you leave behind, is it? It's about the legacy you leave.
Absolutely.
I was struck by that George Bernard Shaw quote he includes. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
Powerful words.
Yeah. It makes you think, what kind of torch will you pass on? Beyond the purely financial, maybe it's documenting your life story, supporting charities, maybe even setting up one of those public ancillary funds he mentions.
Or providing hand-ups, not just handouts, to younger generations, helping them become responsible managers themselves.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is, what one small step will you take this week, this month, to light that torch just a little brighter for your own future and for those you love?